Hey guys, it's me, Amaterasu, back with another part 2, Naruto. Tenshikage, aka, what if Naruto created his own village? But I hope all of you enjoy this video and without further ado. Roll the intro.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Boys, my wheels got in my bag and I got out my field. I'm getting this paper, I'm stacking a meal. I'm with your hoe in the house on the hills. Yeah. I'ma keep it real, at the sacrifice and try to get my bands up. Shorty wanna fuck with me, she see me on the camera. She said she in love with me, but really I can't stand her. She just want part of this life cause she see me on the ground.
Chapter 17, Demon Bitches. Senji strolled down the main street, marveling at how the village looked. Just a few short months ago, they had been sitting around a campfire planning what materials they needed. Now they had citizens, and stores and homes and the glistening white tower in the center of the village. He smiled happily. Naruto's dream had come true. He knew off in the small forest behind the tower that Naruto was training with the toads, but Nagi was somewhere in town and Senji needed someone to spar with. A small boy ran across his path laughing as another boy in a mask chased him. Senji smiled, but then a memory came back, startling him. The memory of the demons in the alleyway they had faced months ago came flooding back like a nightmare and he stopped dead in his tracks. The parting words of that demon Ji-hoon crossed his mind. Senji turned on his heels and went looking for Mabry. Mabry was in the supply warehouse taking inventory, a job he hated. He scowled but did it grudgingly, checking to see what items he needed to order. Senji knocked on the door. Hey Mabry, busy? Mabry just grunted at him. With a smile, Senji walked in. I need to talk to you about something. Remember that demon Ji-hoon? Mabry stopped what he was doing and looked up. Yes, why? Well, do you also remember his promise to be back? And do you also remember the toothpick you gave me to defend myself with last time? Senji asked. Mabry smiled. Yes, I remember those things. What do you want, Senji? Well, just one thing. It's likely that on another mission we will run into him or his monster squad again. I will not face them with a butter knife in my hands. I want a real weapon. And quat. Senji said resolutely. Mabry nodded. Okay. Well then you want either the Kusanagi, which I believe is owned by a fairly horrible ninja called Orochimaru. Heard of him? Ah, yes. Naruto has spoken of him, and I've heard of him before. Good. You won't be getting that one anytime soon. But there are a few swords out there that might suit your purpose. The world is a big place, you know. I think, yes, the best place for you to start is with the names Gon Jang and Mo Yi, and to talk to our resident den of thieves. And quat. Mabry said, going back to his work. Senji left excitedly to hunt down Ali. Nagi scowled and bit into the piece of straw in between his teeth. He watched the classes going on across the field, seeing the two groups of children. Those who had made it to the second chamber, and they were few, and those still figuring out the balance that was required to pass the first chamber. He glanced across in the other direction and saw Senji walking over. Hey Nagi, what you planning to do today? Senji asked. Nagi grinned back. Something fun, I hope. Senji and Nagi found Ali in his guild house preparing for their ceremony later that week. Most of the clan had arrived, although some were out getting items they needed. The place was looking fantastic, Senji thought, nudging Nagi to look at the carving that Guerrera had done and was now over the entrance. Hey Ali, can I ask you something? Senji said, walking closer. Ali looked up annoyed at the interruption in the planning. He was enjoying himself in something frivolous for the first time in his life, and his men were fully into it too. Just a minute, Senji and quat. Ali looked over at one of his men. Suresh, what about the balloons? Did you get the red ones? The man frowned. Leader, no disrespect, but is red really the way we want to go? It would really clash with the green tapestry. I was thinking a golden color. Ali slammed his fist into his desk. I said red. Every time we rob a noble's house or crash a party, the rich always have red balloons. Are we not deserving of red balloons, in this our new home? Do you, Suresh, think the Spirit Wolf clan is not worthy of red balloons? Senji and Nagi watched humorously at the exchange. Ali sure was taking this seriously. Now, what did you guys want? Ali said, turning his attention back to them as Suresh sulked off indignantly, whispering foreign words to Nagi and Senji, although Nagi was sure he heard the word prima donna in there somewhere. Have you ever heard of the names Gon Jang and Mo Yi? Senji asked. Ali's eyes flashed and a grin spread across his face. The legendary twin swords? Of course I know the story. Nagi looked puzzled. I've never heard of them. That's because you are not a weapon user. And quad. Ali replied. Any swordsman worthy of the name knows of the Gonjang and Mo Yi swords. Centuries ago, in a time and land long forgotten, a swordsmith couple was asked by their king to forge a pair of swords for him. These smiths were artists in their work. Their names were Gonjang and Mo Yi. It is said that they used human energy, qi, to power their blast furnace to melt the steel, but it was insufficient for the swords they desired to make. Mo Yi sacrificed herself to increase human qi by throwing herself into the furnace. The desired result was achieved after 3 years, and the two swords were named after the couple. Gonjang kept the Gonjang sword for himself and presented the Mo Yi sword to the king. The king was angered when he discovered the truth and he had Gonjang killed. Their son Qi was eager to avenge his father and he sought the Gonjang sword. At the same time, the king dreamt about a youth wanting to kill him and he placed a bounty on the youth's head. Qi was indignant and so filled with anguish that he started crying during his quest for revenge. Qi met an assassin and he told the assassin his story before committing suicide. The assassin was moved and decided to help Qi fulfill his quest. The assassin brought Qi's severed head and the Gonjang sword to meet the king, who was overjoyed. The assassin asked the king to have Qi's head boiled and he told the king that he needed to take a closer look in order for the head to decompose faster. The king heeded the assassin's words and the assassin seized the opportunity to decapitate the king and throw his head into the boiling water. The assassin then committed suicide by self-beheading and his head fell into the boiling water too. The heads were burnt until the features were no longer recognizable, and they were buried together. The grave was called Tomb of Three Kings and Quat. The swords were buried along with them. Nagi looked wide-eyed at conclusion of Ali's story. So what's so special about these swords then? Because they're made from qi? Senji shook his head. Not just that. The lives sacrificed for the blades have made them instruments of death themselves. It is said that if the wielder of the swords came upon the creator of the world on his journey, even he would be cut. Oh and quat. Nagi finally understood. You want them in case we have to fight that Ji-hoon guy again. Senji grinned and looked back at Ali. So any clues on where the Tomb of Three Kings is? Ali scowled and pointed down the corridor. First room on the left is where we're storing all the scrolls that we've accumulated over the years. There are many. I think I did read one that contained an old map of the old lands. It is somewhere to start. And quat. He squinted his eyes. However, don't think I'm helping you just because we live in the same village. Senji looked at Ali intently. 50%. Ali nodded. Done. And I will send 2 of my clan as well. Senji agreed and walked down the corridor with Nagi close behind. 50% of what? Nagi asked curiously. The king was said to be one of the richest in history. If we find that tomb, there will be a lot of gold. And quat. Senji said, opening the door to find a room piled high with scrolls and parchments. Nagi looked at the stack before them and sighed. This is not the fun day I had pictured. Middle of nowhere, Kakashi looked up at the cloudy sky. A thunderous crack and a gust of cold wind blew at his face. Something felt off. He looked back. The convoy was rolling on. It had been an uneventful week of traveling since the bandit raid. According to his estimate, they had another 2 weeks before they hit the border of Wind Country. Hiraka and Sakura flanked either side of the prince's coach. Calamity had taken to spending time with the prince's son, teaching him how to make and shoot real arrows. Kakashi thought her to be a good teacher. The boy had excellent aim. But today, she sat on top the wagon directly behind the prince's coach. This gave her a better vantage point on any attacks on the convoy. Kakashi himself had on a coat with a hood to shield himself from the rain, also to not give away that he was a ninja protecting the caravan. This way he looked like a normal guard, just slightly ahead and to the left of the wagons. The rain started to fall, whipping at them in blinding sheets. Kakashi knew it was coming, because it was when he would have attacked. 3 figures burst from the tree line and raced towards the prince's wagon. Arrows zipped at them, Calamity firing rapid fire at them. Shockingly none hit, the attackers dodging, ducking and weaving and never missing a step towards the caravan. Kakashi instantly recognized that they were ninja from their movements, not just ordinary bandits. This was no robbery, this was an assassination attempt. Asuma swore violently. The 3 Chunin Danzo had assigned to him had been a pain in the ass for the entire trip. Their unswerving loyalty to Danzo had made conversations near impossible. He had kept to himself for the entire trip, sleeping apart when they stopped to rest at night. They had gone ahead without him, wanting the glory of killing the prince for themselves in order to impress Danzo. He had caught up to them just as they left the trees. He saw the wagons, the archer on top, and a female warrior on the side closest to the attack. There was probably one on the far side as well. From the side of his eyes, he saw a figure start to move to intercept the Chunin. He glanced at him through the rain, not making out much, but his senses told him it was a formidable opponent. As much as Asuma hated Danzo, this was a job that Konoha had accepted. He unsheathed his chakra blades and leapt into the rain. Kakashi saw a fourth shadow leap from the forest, this one heading to cut off his own interception of the three ninja. He stopped in his tracks and focused on this enemy, having a feeling that this one was the most powerful. He had to trust the girls to handle the three ninja. He formed a few quick seals, and used the massive rain sheets to form a water dragon, sending it after the newest attacker. To his credit, the ninja dodged it well, and sliced the dragon's head off with his blades, killing the jutsu. The ninja rushed towards Kakashi, who palmed his kunai and moved to meet the ninja. Hirika saw that Calamity's arrows were not finding their target and took her defensive stance. These were ninja, not bandits, so she'd be hard pressed. She felt a thud in the ground and realized Sakura had landed next to her, having jumped over the wagon. Another thump and Calamity landed on top the wagon, notching more arrows to her bow. "Okay girls, let's kill these guys," Calamity shouted over the rain. A bolt of lightning struck the ground not far, and that was the cue for Sakura and Hirika to lunge forward. Calamity exhaled and fired 5 arrows off her bow at once, hand working the string in a blur, firing off another 5 a second later. The ninja blocked the first volley, but the second managed to catch one in the thigh as he leapt out of the way. At the closer ranger, the arrows were going impossibly fast, almost too fast to dodge. The ninja who was hit fell to one knee and swore violently. One of the unharmed ninja made a hand sign and sent a fireball racing towards the wagon and Calamity. Hirika twisted and turned her cloth, catching the fireball in the folds of cloth. She spun and twirled in mid-air, and using her chakra-enhanced cloth as a slingshot fired the same fireball back towards the ninja, the rain sizzling as it cut a path of steam through the torrent. He made another hand sign and swapped places with a block of wood. The second unharmed ninja came at Sakura with a pair of batons. He turned and twisted, swinging the 2 metal pipes at her head and ribs. She had forward momentum as she was running towards him, so she just slid to her knees and leaned backwards, sliding under his swings. She raised herself to one knee as he came around again, ready to swing. She threw a punch, her Futi no Kiwami hitting him a glancing blow, but still enough to make him drop one of the batons and spin around. He went with the spin and hit Sakura across her ribs with his baton. She let out a yell of pain and clutched her side, both of them leaping backwards to get ready for another attack. Calamity swore violently. The one ninja she had hit was back up, having pulled the arrow out of his leg. She saw Hirika and Sakura engage their enemy, but she had no time to worry about them. She dropped the large bow and pulled out her twin small crossbows. She had built them herself a long time ago, designed to automatically load up to 50 bolts each. It was her favorite weapon for closer range, rapid fire. She aimed at the ninja and fired, the first bolt sailing through the air as the next clicked into place. The ninja swapped out with a wooden log and came rushing back towards the wagons from a slightly different angle. Calamity swiveled in his direction and fired again, another 5 shots each. The ninja ducked under them and kept coming. Calamity looked at the direction he was attacking from and smiled. Fate seemed to be on her side. The wind was blowing from behind her, towards him with a lot of force. A quick glance around and she saw what she was looking for. A small jug of wine the wagon driver seemed to be using frequently. She had seen him drinking from it the day before and stash it above the canopy. She holstered one of her mini crossbows and loaded the second, lighting the arrowhead and praying the rain didn't douse it before it did its job. She kicked the jug towards the attacking ninja and shot it with the bolt as it got close, shattering the clay receptacle. Its liquid contents splashed out, the wind blowing it towards the attacking ninja, the fire bolt catching the alcohol and turning it into a sheet of fire that in a blink of an eye engulfed the ninja. He screamed as the flaming contents burned his face and he swiped at it with his hands to douse it. He never got the chance. Calamity fired 5 more crossbow bolts into his chest while he was distracted, silencing his screams. She turned to see how her friends were doing, hearing the screams of battle over the pounding rain. Hirika swirled in mid-air, barely dodging a brace of shuriken. Her opponent was very skilled in the use of fire jutsu and shuriken throwing, and he had a nasty habit of combining the two in attacks. Her special scarf was resistant to flame attacks, but even so, it was starting to smell a bit singed. The rain also made it harder for her to manipulate it as it was becoming waterlogged. She landed in the mud, almost losing her footing. The ninja smirked and sent another fireball at her, quickly also sending 3 shuriken flying behind the fireball as a secondary attack. Hirika was having quite enough of this. She planted her feet down firm and remembered a lesson her father had taught her when she was very little. One of the most basic tactics anyone ever learned. The strongest defense is a good offense. She twirled the cloth into a tight spin and funneled it to catch the fireball in a wide net. The ninja did not see when she let go the cloth and dove under the fireball and shuriken and got within 2 feet of him. He barely had time to register as she stood in a stance and began going through a series of finger punches and palm thrusts against his chest. He did feel it though when his heart exploded in his chest. As he fell to the ground, a panting Hirika noticed for the first time the headband this ninja was wearing. Uttering a sharp curse, she glanced towards Sakura. The baton wielder swung for Sakura's head with enough force to separate it from her shoulders. She ducked instead of blocking. She had made the mistake of blocking one of his attacks and had what she was sure was a broken left forearm to show for it. She kept her distance though, watching for an opening. They both had one useless arm now, and the fight was getting desperate. The ninja lunged forward, using the baton like a spear. Sakura ducked and tried a punch. He twirled the baton around his forearm and pushed her punch down with the tip. She stepped in, trying to swipe at his feet with her front leg. He raised the leg and kicked out, trying to break her knee. She bent to the left, avoiding the kick, and coming around with her back foot in a tornado kick to his midsection that connected solidly. He stumbled backwards and that was all the opening Sakura needed. She rushed forward. He swung the baton at her midsection, aiming for the damaged ribs. She sacrificed her broken left forearm again and felt the sharp mind-numbing pain as he hit her already broken bones, but it was not enough to stop her. Her fist aimed directly at his face. Her eyes finally registered the symbol on his forehead protector. A leaf. Konoha. It was too late though and her fist connected with all the force she could muster. His head exploded in shards of bone and brain matter, his body freezing for a second then collapsing in the mud. A leaf. Konoha. Sakura cried out, falling to her knees, Hirika and Calamity rushing to her side. Kakashi locked blades with the ninja for the barest of seconds before recognizing the weapons in the man's hands and immediately did a kawarimi with a log. Asuma's chakra blades cut right though the kunai Kakashi was wielding a split second earlier as if it was butter. Asuma, Kakashi shouted, throwing off his raincoat. He stood a short distance away and watched as the Konoha nin turned around and lowered his blades. Kakashi? He said incredulously, what the hell are you doing here? Tengoku Naruto stretched as he exited the tower. He'd been sitting as still as possible for the past few weeks, and the toad said he had made enough progress that he could take a break. He could feel the natural energy enough to not let it turn him into a frog and his body into stone. That was a prospect he was not interested in. So Naruto had to decide what to do on his day off. He looked around, and the place seemed busy. The streets were bustling with people and a few of his clones here and there. Shops were open, people were walking and laughing, children were playing in the streets. He heard strong laughter coming from a noodle stand as members of their resident guild of thieves talked about their ceremony later that night. Naruto grinned. Everyone seemed really happy. He walked down by the schoolyard and saw Guerrera teaching a class. He waved and saw the man smile. Naruto wondered what his face looked like under that mask. He glanced over at the training field and saw that a few students were still trying to cross the first chamber. Naruto walked over upon seeing a familiar face in the last few. Hey Inari. And Quat. Naruto called out. What you doing? He's joining the class Naruto. Do not disturb him. He needs to realize he's overthinking his steps and just let it flow. And Quat. Tenshi said from Naruto's left. He enrolled a few days ago. Naruto saw Inari make 2 successful steps on the logs then slip and fall in. He frowned thoughtfully, wondering how he could help. Inari climbed out soaking wet and joined the back of the line. Naruto smiled. He knew how he could help. Hey Inari, aren't you from Wave Country? Don't they have water where you're from? You look silly, Naruto said laughing. Tenshi scowled and moved to say something but was cut off. Oh yeah. Baka. I'll show you, Inari shouted back and took to the water like a jet, anger fueling his legs as he ran from log to log and landed safely on the other side. He stood there a moment, shocked at his success, realizing what he was doing wrong. Naruto laughed. Good job little brother. Now get going to the second chamber, he said with a big grin and a thumbs up. Inari laughed and walked over to the second chamber to the cheers of his new classmates. Naruto nodded at a smiling Tenchi and headed down to where he knew Yoshi was installing the new gates. He had insisted no one else could help him, not even Naruto's clones. A wrong touch would spoil the Heavenstone material until it's set in place. On his way he spotted the Spirit Wolf Guild, decked out elaborately in ribbons, flags and lights, all in preparation for tonight. He could smell the feast that was being cooked, and yearned to go inside to sneak a bite. But he wasn't sure he could steal from a master thief without being noticed. He'd try later after he talked to Yoshi, he promised himself with a grin. Naruto found Yoshi using a weird system of huge levers, cables, ropes and wheels to lower the left side of the elaborate gate into place. Yoshi was holding ropes with both hands, and one foot, huge magnifying glasses on his head, tongue sticking out the side of his mouth as he pulled and pushed, lowering the gate into place. As it snapped into position, the material of the gate shimmered and let loose a hum. Yoshi released the ropes and panted. Phew. Finally. One down. Hey Naruto, did you hear that? That hum? I call that Heavenstone harmonics. It happens when a lot of my Heavenstone touches the clouds. Naruto was fascinated. Why does it do that? Yoshi was gathering up his ropes and attaching them to the gate. Huh? Oh. No idea. And Quat. He replied without even looking up. Have you seen my phalange? Size 3/4 of a millimeter? I'm missing that from my kit. Naruto shook his head. He marveled at the ornate gate. Guerrera had designed a beautiful mold that Yoshi had used to cast the Heavenstone gates. It was beautiful, and shimmered in the sunlight, its odd material reflecting and refracting light creating almost a rainbow effect. Yoshi, Naruto asked, "You are coming to the guild feast tonight, right?" Yoshi nodded. Yes. Societal interactions are important in order to maintain good working relationships with citizenry. Naruto cocked his head quizzically. What? Yoshi straightened up. You think I should put a doorbell? What? Naruto replied. In case someone comes calling and no one's near the gate, how would we know they're here? Maybe a nice doorbell? Yoshi asked. Naruto thought about it for a few seconds. I suppose a bell would be okay. Yoshi looked at Naruto. That's a great idea. A bell. How on earth did you think of that? It makes sense, you know, just in case someone comes. And quat. He went back to attaching his ropes and cables to the other side of the gate. Naruto looked at him for a few seconds and then laughed. Yoshi, I'm real glad you crashed into our tower. See you later. He walked back to the Spirit Wolf Guild, waving to the inventor who smiled back happily. Senji and Nagi sat at a table in the scroll room looking over a scroll. Ali had come in to talk to them about what they had found. Yes, this is the old language. This is the map of the old country. And quat. Ali confirmed. Nagi nodded. He pulled out a journal they had found and read a passage. And we came across a stone tablet with 3 skulls engraved on it. Upon the heads of the skulls were gold-adorned crowns. My men took then pried the gold from the stone. The jewels would be traded for food at the nearest outpost. But we're a week's ride east still from Abydos. Nagi looked up. From other scrolls that we have found, that symbol has to be the tomb of the 3 kings. And we have a general idea. Senji pointed at the map. There, what does this say, Ali? Ali smiled. That says Abydos. You've found the location of the lost city of Abydos. You do realize though where this is in current times, right? Senji nodded. He pulled out another map, a current one of the world, and laid it over the older scroll. We don't have a choice. This is where we need to start looking, Senji said with a smile. Nagi cleared his throat. Guys, listen to this. And quat. He continued reading from the old journal. My men are dying one by one. Something comes for them at night. Rumors of a curse are all over the encampment. Our horses are all dead with no explanation. Their bodies are turning a sickly green color. I am not sure what to do. I hope we make it to Abydos. Nagi looked up. What do you think about that? Senji smiled. I think it makes it a bit more exciting. What about you? Nagi and Ali laughed. Agreed, they said in unison. Think Naruto would come? Senji asked. Come for? Naruto's head peeked into the room, his mouth stuffed with an eclair. Ali looked at him and his face lost its smile. Is that one of our desserts in your mouth for our celebration feast later, Naruto? Naruto gulped and disappeared around the corner. Ali ran out the door after him. You will give that back immediately. I have a very specific head count to dessert ratio, he said, screaming after him down the hallways of the guild and out into the front yard. Nagi smirked. Yeah, Naruto would come if he could. We'll ask Jiraiya if it's okay tomorrow. Tonight though, we feast. Tomorrow we head for the city of Sunagakure! And quat. Tsunade sighed in relief as a young girl successfully identified all the organs in a toad. She was starting with a small class, some older citizens and young children. Less than 10. But still, it was a start to her medical trainees. They all stared at the dissected frogs in front of them a little squeamishly. Tsunade frowned at that. I need to break them of their sensitive stomachs. Medicine is no place for that foolishness. This basic biology lesson was going well. These students had, if not an aptitude, at least a willingness to learn, and that Tsunade could work with. She saw Naruto walk past her hospital happily, popping chocolate eclairs into his mouth. She smiled sadly. No one had told him as yet what had happened in Konoha. He didn't know about the war with Iwagakure and the state of affairs back home. She wondered idly for a second if it would bother him, but she shook that thought away. Naruto cared for his friends, and many of his friends still lived in Konoha. He would be worried, but they had specific instructions from Ma and Pa Toad not to disrupt his focus while he was training. She heard a sound like a clear crystal bell ring through the village and an arc of light that spread through the streets. It was gone in a second, followed by a shout of Eureka. The villagers who had looked concerned a second earlier just smiled and went back about their day. Tsunade scoffed and turned back to her class. Middle of nowhere, Asuma sat around the campfire with Kakashi, Sakura and the 2 girls that Sakura introduced as her teammates. The 2 girls watched him suspiciously, which he supposed he would do in their position. They did indeed seem to be a formidable team, dispatching the 3 Chunin that had accompanied him on this disastrous mission. He continued his story. So I woke up and discovered they had left without me. I caught up to them just as they attacked. We made fast time getting here in a couple weeks, full speed, very little rest. We had to intercept you before you reached the Wind Country border or our mission would stand little chance for success. Kakashi nodded. It makes sense. So Danzo has declared himself a conquering emperor? Asumo nodded and sipped his tea. Yes, ninja loyal to him have been growing. He's recruiting power-hungry nin from within the Iwagakure ranks as well. He's definitely building back his army, but it would probably be another year or two before he's at full strength. We lost a lot of ninja in that battle. Sakura wanted to cry, scream, and yell. She was both angry and saddened by what had happened to her home in just 1 year's time. When you left, you just told us you were going ... and quat. Asuma began, but Kakashi cut him off. Now's not the time to speak of such things. What do you think you will do now? Kakashi asked. The girls noticed the odd exchange but said nothing. Asuma shrugged. Well, the mission failed. The prince will enter Wind Country in a few days, so there is no more chance for an easy assassination. From Wind they go to Lightning, then I understand that he intends to hire Konoha as his bodyguards on the last leg of his trip. But that will be a few months from now, and the political climate may have changed. Danzo may not want to kill him or may even accept the pay to protect him then kill him. There is nothing we can do about that. No way. And quat. Sakura shook her head. We won't allow it. Calamity nodded as well. We'll just have to protect them from Konoha until they reach their home. We'd never allow Danzo to kill the prince or his son. I'm very happy to hear you say that. And quat. The prince walked over, his girth swaying a little from side to side. If what you say is true, and your Hokage was hired by a courtesan from my land, then we need to get home sooner rather than later. My father would know what to do about it. I am sorry to say this, but it would be best if once we enter Wind Country we head for the nearest port and sail home. I will pay you to continue as our bodyguards until we reach home. Hiruka looked at him intently. You do realize that if your own people hired someone to kill you, then something bad might be waiting for you back home? Nonsense. The prince said dismissively. My father, the king, would never allow it. We will make the sailing arrangements. This has been a horrible trip. We didn't get to do any shopping at all. But I won't endanger my son with these assassination attempts. And quat. He turned to go. You know, my servants are whispering your names now, girls. They saw your fight today. They are calling you both celestial beauties from heaven and demon bitches from hell. You were indeed frightful. He walked back to the main encampment where his son stood waiting. Calamity laughed. Well, the boys can call themselves archangels all they like. We're the demon bitches. Ha 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 ha. Hiruka too laughed. Sakura looked dismayed. But, they also called us celestial beauties? Can't we stick with that? Sakura asked plaintively. No. Hiruka responded happily. This will strike more fear in people. It's fantastic. Kakashi sighed and smiled beneath his mask. Calamity grinned at him and winked, causing him to blush for the briefest of seconds. Asuma sipped his tea, pondering his situation. I have commitments in Konoha. I agree that this village you speak of sounds wonderful, Kakashi. But Konoha is my home as much as it is yours. I must go back. Kakashi nodded. Yes, I understand. It is likely that Danzo will punish you. Asuma scoffed. A few months in the jails will be pretty restful. And quat. He looked up at Kakashi over his tea, who gave him the slightest of nods. Asuma looked back down at his tea. You girls are strong. I didn't see the fight, but I saw the results. You are a good team. And quat. Asuma said quietly. Hiruka, Sakura, and Calamity all smiled. Sensei, Sakura asked, would you tell Ino that I'm alright? Asuma nodded and put his tea down. I will. Now tell me more about this village of yours. I won't leave until morning and I'd like to know all about it. Tengoku fireworks lit up the night sky over Tengoku. The crowd clapped appreciatively and cheered as more roared into the night, bursting into explosions of color. A trio of Ollie's thieves were drumming away, one with small hand cymbals, one with his hands on a large drum around his neck, the other with 2 sticks on a smaller drum around his neck. The beat was intoxicating and exciting. Confetti and streamers flew everywhere. Music filled the street outside the Thieves' Guild. Ali was decked out in an elaborate suit that had as many ornate jewels on it as any rich merchant could dream of. It was in fact stolen from one such merchant. Naruto wore his white suit for the occasion on the insistence of Tenchi and Tsunade. Citizens smiled at him and shook his hand, thanking him profusely for their new lives and happiness. Naruto was bewildered as to what to do about all the gratitude and attention. Ali cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. The crowd quieted down as Ali stood on a small stage he had erected next to the entryway of his guild house. Tonight we mark the opening of our new home. As is the custom of my people, all neighbors must be welcomed into the home as if they are family. From tonight onwards, you are my family. You are our family. The Brotherhood of the Spirit Wolf recognizes the people of Tengoku as our brothers and sisters. The crowd cheered and spurred him on. Ali was grinning at the reception from the citizens. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought his clan would be this accepted. We welcome you into our home. In the name of Kali the warrior goddess, our patron and our guide, come inside. Share our food and wine. Welcome to the house of the Brotherhood, he bellowed, with fireworks timed to go off exactly as he finished the speech. They went off with a bang, showering red sparks on the crowd. Ali smiled widely. Thank goodness they fired those in time, Mabry said to Tenchi. I hear he threatened death to any clan member who mistimed their cue or failed in their assignment. Tenchi laughed and joined the surge as the crowd entered the building, heading for the banquet tables on the back lawn. Chapter 18, The Burning Sands, Tengoku Hey Naruto, Nagi shouted across the hall. How many bottles of water to pack? He eyed his duffel bag and contemplated shoving another few bottles in the lumpy-looking pack. 10 more maybe. What? Naruto shouted back from his room. Just the one canteen should be enough? What? Senji shouted across from his room, poking his head outside. The boys had all chosen rooms on the same floor, same corridor. Guys, just bring enough to not slow you down. Honestly, haven't either of you been to the desert before? I crossed that same desert more than a year ago. Naruto chimed back in, adjusting the jacket on his white ninja suit and appos. Despite the heat they expected, Jiraiya had told them to dress properly. The heat wouldn't kill you, but the sand might, and the nights were bitter cold. Naruto chose to wear a lighter material shirt all the same. The jacket would come off easily enough if he got too hot. Yeah, well, not all of us have an auto-regenerating body. Quad. Senji said as he shuffled into the hallway. He too had his jacket slung over his shoulder. Jiraiya came up the stairs and looked at them with a wry grin. I wish I could come with you. It sounds like a lot of fun. But Mabry and I need to head down to one of our suppliers. Quad. He nodded his head at the map of the world that was framed in the hallway. You know which wind stream will take you there? Naruto nodded, stepping out into the hall. I've got a stream that will take us to within a mile of Suna. Then we'll need to walk. Quad. Naruto frowned. I really wish there was an easier way to come back. It would take a month just to come back home from there. Jiraiya shrugged. We know there are streams that come back, we just don't know where they originate, or how to find them at all. You finding the entrance stream was pure luck in the first place. Livingston, he found the stream. Quad. Naruto sighed. Maybe we'll get lucky and find one. Let's go guys, Nagi declared as he stepped out of his room, 2 duffel bags oddly shaped because of all the bottles of water in them strapped to his back. Naruto and Senji laughed only to earn them a dark scowl from Nagi. The 3 friends walked out, meeting up with 2 members of the Spirit Wolf clan and heading for the Wind River that would take them to Suna. Border of Wind Country. The girls saw the contingent of sand ninja from Sunagakure waiting by the edge of the trail. The grassy plain they were on was getting more sparse with every mile they put behind them. Sakura saw what looked like a shimmering lake in the distance, but she knew it was just an illusion caused by an endless sea of sand. The sand nin were only 3 in number, standing there just watching the wagons roll up to them. When they got close enough, Sakura realized that she recognized one of the ninja. If she remembered correctly, his name was Baki, and he was the jounin assigned to Gaara and his siblings. Kakashi had also recognized him and had walked up to him. Baki, startled, recognized Kakashi instantly. He grimaced. Kakashi, you are still alive. Kakashi nodded, looking around. So it would seem, and I think I will keep it that way for a while yet. Quad. He looked squarely at Baki. Was it necessary to bring this many nin? Sakura looked at the 2 of them, puzzled. The area was empty except for Kakashi, Baki and 2 more sand nin. Baki nodded. The prince is a very important person. His herald told us of the attacks and the assassination attempt. If he were to die while in the custody of Sunagakure, it would bring shame to our village and our Kazekage. Baki made a hand signal and 100 sand nin burst from under the dunes. In a flash they were arranged in flanking positions on either side of the caravan. The prince leaned out of his wagon, not bothering to step outside. Are the preparations being made? He asked Baki. The sand jounin nodded. The ship will be waiting at the dock in Ayabear in 2 weeks. It will take us 1 week to get to Sunagakure, where your majesty will be hosted by the Kazekage for 2 days. Then we will escort you to the port city of Ayabear and your ships. Kakashi cocked his head. We will be along for the ride. We will be escorting them while on the ships and until the prince is safely home. Baki looked intently at Kakashi but said nothing. He turned on his heel and as if on cue, the caravan lurched forward, the sand nin on either side. Konoha Asuma could taste the blood in his mouth. He turned his head sideways and spit it to the ground. He looked through the sweat and blood dripping into his eyes at the 2 ninjas standing in front of him. His body sagged against the ropes that bound him to the post in the middle of the village square. He could hear the sobbing coming from his right. He knew it would be Ino without even looking, but refused to look at her. He would show no fear, facing this punishment. He could sense Kurenai in the crowd as well, and hoped that someone would stop her from doing anything rash. Danzo's voice boomed down at him again. Warriors of Konoha, this is what happens to failures. Better he died with his team than to come back in shame and disgrace. He nodded to the 2 ninja in front of Suma again and they began another round of beatings. Fists and kicks to his face and torso, while he was tied and unable to defend himself. It was a public torture. Asuma could see the logic in it. Danzo was using him to make an example. to set fear in the hearts of would-be rebels. Also, as Asuma was the son of the previous Hokage, it cemented the change even clearer for those that had any lingering doubts as to who ran things now. Part of Asuma wanted to swear at Danzo, to tell him what he thought of the fascist. But that would sign his death warrant, and Asuma had a lot to live for. Also, he was sure Danzo was hoping for just that, and he wouldn't give him the satisfaction. After a few more minutes, Asuma felt the world go black. Shikamaru stared at the scene in front of him, his face impassive, his mind working a million miles a minute. To show any emotion would signal to Danzo where his loyalties lie. For some reason he had a feeling that Danzo was always watching. He calculated that Danzo would beat Asuma into a pulp, but there was also a perhaps 50% chance that he would decide to kill him on the spot. Shikamaru was looking at the beating of his sensei, but he was also watching Danzo for any sign of what he was going to do. Shikamaru was planning for that contingency and planning fast. His attention snapped back to Asuma when a final blow to his head knocked him unconscious. He saw the two root ninja look back up at Danzo for directions on what to do next. Shikamaru saw Danzo nod to the ninja with an evil satisfied grin, and suddenly Shikamaru knew where this was going. They were going to kill Asuma. Shikamaru brought his hands together and made his hand seals quickly. It was time to see if his hastily constructed plan would work. This would have to be flawless. Directly ahead of him was a root ninja. Shikamaru had seen him before. He was an explosives expert. Shikamaru's shadow grabbed his in the thick crowd, unseen. The root ninja didn't have time to react before he found his hands flash down to his waist and launch a series of explosive balls and tags at both Danzo and the two root ninja by Asuma. Shikamaru tried to keep his movements as small as possible so as to not give away what he was doing from the thick of the crowd. He folded his tongue inside his mouth, to ensure that the root ninja couldn't give away what he was doing. The explosives went off close enough to the root ninja to completely distract them from Asuma. Danzo seemed unfazed, scanning for where they came from. Shikamaru acted quickly, releasing the root ninja but grabbing the citizen to his left. He made that citizen push the root ninja into the open space before the ninja could realize he had been released. Shikamaru then released that citizen and shouted, "He's the one. He's attacking the Hokage." In the melee no one knew who shouted that, but eyes turned towards the ninja who looked bewildered. He opened his mouth to protest but 3 kunai embedded themselves in his chest. Shikamaru had thrown them from the center of the crowd. No one had seen him move. There was general chaos as some of the explosives were on timed release and were still going off. The crowd began to scatter. Danzo swore, the effectiveness of this execution was now lost. The witnesses to it were leaving. "Throw him in a cell," he ordered the two root ninja. With one last look at the dead ninja who betrayed him, Danzo turned and went back inside the tower. He knew that ninja personally, and he was loyal to a fault. He had clearly been framed, and Danzo had a limited list of people who would have been able to do that. But he had no proof. It just showed that he was right, that there were ninja working against him instead of for him. But he would crush them. All of them. Konoha would prevail. He, Danzo, would destroy them. 1 week later Sarakiel Calamity had exceptionally sharp eyes. It helped her in her archery. She could see targets from a long distance away, and aim with perfect precision. So it was with some confusion that she saw 5 objects fall from the sky a few miles to their right. They were within a few miles of Sarakiel according to Kakashi, and indeed she could see the looming cliffs in the distance. So those falling objects to their right, what were they? Could they be? "Hey Kakashi," Calamity shouted down at the Jounin from her perch atop the lead wagon. Kakashi barely nodded to acknowledge her call out, his face buried in that book he had started back reading. They were safely in Wind Country territory so Kakashi gave the illusion of being less alert. Calamity though had a feeling he was more alert than ever. For one thing, he hadn't turned a single page in miles. "Sweetie, can you tear yourself away from that book for a second and focus on a real woman?" Calamity said loudly with a smirk on her face. Kakashi blushed and looked up at her, to the accompaniment of laughter from the prince's staff and San Nin in earshot. She nodded off to the east. "I saw 5 objects fall." Kakashi turned quickly and stared off into the distance, his body tensing. The San Nin also seemed to stiffen and look off to the east. After a few seconds Kakashi relaxed. When he turned back to Calamity she could see he was replacing the Konoha headband over his Sharingan eye. "Nothing to worry about. Just some foolish birds. And quat," Kakashi said nonchalantly and went back to his book. The San Nin laughed and continued walking, glad to be almost home. Calamity glanced at Sakura and Haruka and winked. Looks like the boys had come to Suna as well. The wagon train entered into the city of Sarakiel with much fanfare. The citizens had come out to greet the prince and his entourage. Streamers floated down and music played. The Kazekage knew how to greet royalty. The prince would spend a lot here and inject money into the local economy. The girls grinned at all the revelry. A stark contrast to the weeks spent in the wastelands and then the desert. "Girls," Hiraka said, "I am absolutely filthy. The very first thing I am doing is finding a hotel room with a cold shower." "Here, here." Calamity chimed in while Sakura nodded vigorously. Sounds good, girls. Then we can see about finding those foolish birds. And quat. Kakashi said quietly, appearing close to them. And stay close. We are unknown warriors in a ninja village. Do not be fooled by this hospitality. We are being watched very, very closely. The girls looked around and noticed that some of the Sand Nin were indeed watching them. Kakashi nodded. Let's do our best to be low-key. And quat. The girls shook their heads in agreement. Hey, where's Gaara? A loud voice boomed over the crowds and the music. With a sense of dread, the girls and Kakashi looked back over at the lead wagon. There, in full white suit, with his two teammates flanking him in all white, the sun shining behind them like a light, stood Naruto with his hands folded and a huge grin plastered on his face. Hey Gaara, it's me, where are you? He shouted again, laughing. Senji and Nagi grinning as well. Sakura saw that Sand Nin were closing in on Naruto and the guys, so she signaled to the girls and they started making their way back to the wagons. A shout went up from the crowd and someone shouted, "It's the Kazekage." They all looked up and saw Gaara approaching on a wave of sand 20 feet off the ground. Naruto smiled even wider than before and Hiraishi too on top the wave next to Gaara. The crowd gasped and the Sand Ninja, Baki included, drew their weapons to protect the Kazekage. But Naruto made no attacking moves. Instead he held out his hand to Gaara, who seemed shocked by it all. Naruto, you are a fool, Gaara said quietly, but without malice, shaking his hand. The Sand Nin seemed to relax their guard a bit, but not completely. Baki recognized now who Naruto was and was startled. The transformation was glaring. The small boy had grown several inches in the past year and his muscle tone was evident under the white suit he was wearing. Even the white outfit, although odd for a ninja to wear, was a big difference from the orange jumpsuit Naruto was famous for. A lot must have happened to him, Baki thought. Senji smiled and looked around from their position. Sure, it was a flashy entrance, but really only the Spirit Wolf clan members Ravi and Rashid, brothers, felt like sneaking in would be to their benefit. The city was just a stopping point so that they could get their bearings before starting the search. He spotted a familiar head of pink hair and froze. Sakura, Hirika and Calamity were glaring at them. He nudged Nagi, who looked over startled. They look upset. What did you do? Nagi asked Senji. Me? Senji replied plaintively. Naruto is the one palling around with the Kazekage of this place. Naruto looked carefully at Gaara. So you're the Kazekage now? Good job, he said without a hint of jealousy. Gaara looked at him, with what could almost, be determined to be a smile. I hear something about a mysterious village at the edge of the world. And its leader, a man in white who wipes out cities with a single blow. Naruto grinned and put his hand behind his head. Guilty, I guess. So what's with the parade? Knew I was coming? And quat. The parade was for me, you young whelp. The prince bellowed from his vantage point near his wagon. He smiled though at the display of power. Gaara on the sand and Naruto appearing next to him by magic. Now stop stealing my thunder and clear the way so my son and I can get to the Kazekage's tower. And quat. He laughed as he re-entered the wagon. Naruto flashed back to the wagon with Senji and Nagi while Gaara turned and moved the sand wave back with him towards the tower. There would be time for talking later. Naruto spied the girls after Senji whispered something to him. He looked shocked then ecstatic, waving at them in the crowd and motioning for them to come. The girls continued to glare at the boys, angry at basically being upstaged. All hopes of keeping a low profile gone, they too hopped on top the wagons and rode with them. Kakashi sighed and melted into the crowd. He had seen a flash of a familiar face earlier, so he knew he had something to do. Tamari was startled at the change in Naruto. Her brother had changed so much because of this boy that he was never far from her thoughts. When they had heard about his banishment, Gaara was enraged. It had taken them weeks to calm him down, to not go immediately and devastate Konoha. She remembered a loud-mouthed, brash, impulsive boy. What she saw before her was someone else entirely. Not only was he physically different, taller, broader shoulders, his mannerisms had changed. He seemed to be more, still. The fidgeting he had been known for was gone. His smile was just as warm and friendly towards them, but something was off. He seemed to have matured, if that was at all possible in such a short space of time. Kankuro was looking at her oddly. He had noticed it as well. Gaara was too enthralled with his first real friend to be bothered by either of his siblings at the moment. Nagi and Senji were off to the side of the room, explaining to Sakura, Hirika and Calamity why they were there. A damn treasure hunt? You've come halfway around the world on a treasure hunt? Calamity said loudly. Tamari's head spun towards them. Treasure hunt? And they were in Sunagakuur? What treasure? Gaara asked solemnly. Naruto smiled and pointed at Senji. Senji can explain it. Senji launched into the tale of the two swords and how he wanted them for their ability to slay demons. Gaara bristled a bit at this, but Naruto explained the fight they had with Ji-Hoon's demons and monsters. Gaara, Tamari and Kankuro listened intently. So there is a whole land full of demons? Kankuro chimed in. Naruto nodded. That's what Mabry says. The land of the dead and its capital city Yomi. The tailed beasts are just soldiers from there. I spoke to my tenant about it as well. Tamari rubbed her chin thoughtfully. Why should you have these swords? If they're in the wind country they belong to the Kazekage, or at the very least the daimyo. Gaara looked at her and shook his head before Senji could protest. We wouldn't even know they existed or their location. Quad. He looked over at Naruto and the other members of Tengoku. But Tamari makes a valid point. This is our land. We will take a percentage of any treasures found. 50%. Senji opened his mouth to argue but Naruto glanced at him sharply. This did not silence the two Spirit Wolf clan members however. Our leader has already bargained for 50%. Ravi exclaimed. Gaara looked at him coldly. He will settle for 25% or nothing at all. Naruto looked around the room and said loudly. Everyone just relax. It's a treasure hunt. It's going to be fun. Worry about the gold and stuff after. And Quad. He turned back to Gaara and continued with the stories of his adventures since leaving Konoha. The tension in the room remained palpable. Somewhere in grass country Orochimaru sat in his chair and watched the display before him. It was really quite remarkably what a year of training had done for the boy. The added motivation of the sporadic reports of Naruto's progress had spurred him on to even greater heights than Orochimaru had foreseen. Sasuke moved fluidly, decimating the small army gathered before him. His Sharingan eyes spun madly, anticipating moves, countering attacks. His sword lashed out like a viper's tongue, stabbing and maiming, but not killing. This bothered Orochimaru. The boy still seemed reluctant to kill. Not that it mattered. He just wanted the Uchiha's body, skills and eyes to be sufficiently trained for when he took over his body. He had another year or two to wait though. A lot could happen in another year. Kakashi. The voice floated in the air. The alley Kakashi had found himself in only had one exit, but he knew that before entering. He turned around to look lazily at the speaker, the man he had followed. He smiled at the familiar sight of green tights and a bowl haircut, with the thickest eyebrows on any jounin alive. Mito, Kakashi nodded in greeting. Guy seemed different, more sedated. His customary exuberance was missing. Kakashi saw a shadow behind Guy and realized his apprentice and doppelganger was with him as well. What are you doing in Suna? Kakashi asked Guy. I suppose I could ask you the same thing. And Quad. Guy said, sighing. Danzo sent us as ambassadors to Suna. We are to appease the Kazekage that Danzo has no intention of moving against him, but wants peace instead. Danzo cannot afford another war as yet. We lost a lot of men in the battle with Iwa. Did you hear about that? Kakashi nodded. We ran into Asuma a few weeks ago, he told us. Guy looked startled. You saw Asuma? On his failed mission? Ah yes. I see now. You were protecting the prince. Could you not have let Asuma kill him? His punishment was brutal. Kakashi's eye grew dark. Tell me. While Guy told the tale of Asuma's public torture and almost execution, Kakashi noticed Lee getting angrier and angrier. There was a lot of pent-up rage in Guy's apprentice, most likely feeling like there was nothing he could do, Kakashi thought, so he's locked up in the Konoha dungeons until further notice. And Quad. Guy finished his tale. Kakashi swore. I assume it was either the Yamanaka or Nara clan that interfered? Guy nodded. Shikamaru. Good for him. And Quad. Kakashi said thoughtfully. Kakashi looked at Lee. Lee, Sakura and Naruto are in town. Why don't you go and find them? Lee was dumbstruck. And Naruto? Sakura? Here? He looked at his sensei who nodded in approval. In a flash Lee was gone. Guy, Konoha needs our help. My thoughts when I left was I'd be able to find a way to overthrow him. But it seems our best bet is assassination. Guy sighed. The man is guarded like an emperor. Impossible to tell how many root members are with him at any given time. And now he has loyal Iwa Nin as well. He may not be the strongest ninja, but he's incredibly well guarded. He is always one step ahead. Kakashi paced. Naruto founded a warrior village. But the place is peaceful. The warriors it would generate are a few years from being ready for any sort of battle. Naruto himself is not ready. He could probably wipe out the city of Konoha, but we need more precision than that. I'm afraid my plan to find help to attack Danzo is a failure. So far. Don't give up hope. Kakashi. And Quad. Guy said. You are safe for now. So are Asuma and Anko, who is also in the dungeons. Konoha is hell but we are alive still. The citizens of Konoha do not need outsiders to save us. We would lose our pride, our self-respect. We will come up with a better plan soon enough. An opening will appear for one of us to take him out. Till then you are safest far from Konoha. Kakashi swore in frustration. What are you going to do about Lee? Lee is holding on to a lot of rage. He's helpless like the rest of us. I wish I could find an outlet for him other than training. It seems to add to his feeling of helplessness. Kakashi looked thoughtful. I'm going on a mission to the Crescent Moon Kingdom. Sakura and her new teammates are protecting the prince. Why not send Lee with us, as a training mission? It would be good for him to have a break from the troubles of Konoha for a while. Mito Guy stared up at the sky. A gust of wind and sand swept past them. I will be stationed in Suna for a few months. I think that's an acceptable form of training for Lee. I will talk to him later. And quat. He walked up to Kakashi and they clasped each other's forearm. It is good to see you, brother. And quat. They both said in unison. Wow. Naruto remarked as the tiger leapt through the ring of fire to thunderous applause. The massive crowd watching the circus act was very appreciative of the feats. Even Ninja appreciated good entertainment. Sakura and Hiraka squealed as a clown squirted water at them. Calamity laughed so hard she almost choked on her cotton candy. They were having a blast, just relaxing. The prince and his son sat with Gaara and his siblings in a VIP box in the stands. They were for the most part also enjoying things. Gaara himself seemed impassive, but his siblings and Naruto, who kept glancing at him, could see that he was flabbergasted. Gaara had never had a chance to enjoy such simple pleasures in his life. When the show ended, they gathered outside the main tent. I love this circus. The prince exclaimed. They must come with us to my kingdom. Alarmed, Sakura and Hiraka tried to explain to the prince that they may be headed into danger, to which he was dismissive. Calamity was watching Hikaru, who seemed fascinated by the tiger that was being rolled away in a cage. A week later, Naruto, Senji and Nagi stood facing Sakura, Hiraka, Calamity and Lee by the exit of Sunagakure. There had been a lot to catch up on, and Gaara had wanted to hear about Naruto's village and what had happened to him over the past year. Naruto had been thrilled to be talking to Gaara again. A person from his past who had no grudges towards him. A real friend. Still, Naruto found himself not revealing the exact location of his village. He didn't know why, but felt he should keep that secret for now. Nagi and Senji had smiled and let Naruto catch up, meanwhile exploring the city themselves. Neither had ever been this far east and it was vastly different from anything they'd ever seen. The girls had been keeping an eye on the prince and his son, but also glad to share their tales of this mission with the boys' team. Lee's tearful reunion with Naruto and Sakura was an embarrassing spectacle. His appearance had shocked everyone. Naruto and Sakura for a friend they hadn't seen in a year. Nagi, Senji, Hiraka and Calamity for his appearance. They had all gotten along well, although the girls were at first hesitant about him coming along on their mission. Kakashi explained to them that Lee was a formidable fighter, and they had no idea what they were getting themselves into by going to that island. Today they were all parting ways. Naruto and his team were going treasure hunting, and the girls were going with the prince to the port city to set sail. Be safe, Sakura, Lee. Naruto waved exuberantly. Take care of yourselves, Hiraka. Hiraka and Senji exchanged a look that didn't need words spoken. Pride, desire, happiness, worry. It was all there. Calamity winked at Kakashi and hopped on top the nearest wagon, ready for her trip. Kakashi nodded at the boys, and Guy who stood nearby. Kakashi also noted several new additions to the prince's entourage, going about hustling and getting the caravans ready. He looked at them carefully, noting their faces for future reference. The walk to the head of the caravan. The two groups parted ways, off to their own individual adventures. Right, so what's first? Naruto turned around and asked Nagi and Senji. Senji grinned. Well, we have our map, and we have a starting point. The Kazekage has assigned a team to us, with camels and supplies. It's a few days' walk from here. Nagi looked at the two of them and smiled. Naruto, aren't you worried about the girls? Kakashi made it seem like they might be walking into a trap. Naruto shook his head. Kakashi is with them, so is Lee. Plus those girls can really fight. I trust them. Besides, I have a backup plan in place. Wanna let us in on it? Nagi asked. Naruto laughed. Not really, let's go treasure hunting. The boys found their group preparing to ride out. Kankuro was with them. Gaara asked me to accompany you. I feel he would have liked to come himself, but there are a lot of duties associated with being Kazekage. And quat. He offered by way of explanation. The two Spirit Wolf clan members sat on their camels, lower half of their faces covered by their scarves. Their eyes glared at Kankuro, obviously upset that he was coming along. Perhaps they hoped we could leave without giving Gaara his share, Senji thought amusedly. Maybe they don't realize we have thousands of miles of sand all around us, and pissing off a cage who wields the power of sand would be monumentally stupid. Naruto just smiled and nodded. They all mounted the camels and rode out, very uncomfortably, towards their treasure. As they left through the exit, they took a sharp turn east, riding around the cliffside of the village. That is the direction we must go. And quat. Kankuro said, pointing towards what looked like a shimmering lake, and barely discernible mountains. Senji, Nagi and Naruto stared at the sweltering, shimmering plain before them, wondering what they had gotten themselves into. A few days later Sakura looked out at the ocean, feeling the sea breeze against her face. She hadn't been on a ship since Naruto, Sasuke and she had been to the land of snow. She smiled as she remembered that time, A much more innocent time for her. Lee was nearby, as he always was these days. But he was not the Lee Sakura remembered. He was much more quiet, much more reserved. His training also seemed ridiculous. Even on the ship, he climbed ropes, did laps on the railing of the boat, threatening to fall off and into the water below any second. Sakura didn't remember him being this way. It was disconcerting. Lee had been told to not tell Sakura and the girls about the fate of Asuma, and he obeyed his teacher. The girls didn't need the guilt of that to distract them from the mission at hand. He did, however, take it upon himself to act as the girls' guardian. Lee knew he owed Naruto that much. He didn't doubt they could handle themselves, but yet he vowed to himself that he would let not one drop of their blood hit the ground. Calamity sat lazily in a deck chair. The ship was massive, and had a swimming pool in the front deck. As she lazed around, she idly wondered at the way the world works. One day they're fighting for their lives in the forests of the Badlands. Next they're crossing a massive desert. Then they're being hosted by the Kazekage as special guests. Now they were on a luxury liner headed to the world-famous Crescent Moon Kingdom. But it was probably a death trap waiting for them. Life was funny. One of the servants was throwing a bucket of dishwater off the back of the boat when he slipped and fell over the railing. Another servant tried to grab onto him but missed and failed. The servant who fell did a backflip in midair and attached his feet to the hull of the ship. Phew, he let a gasp of relief escape his lips. He was preparing to climb back up when a wave splashed up and hit him full force against the hull. He popped into smoke. The watching servant sighed and went back about his work. Hundreds of miles away, a ship that should not be able to float eased its way through the waters of the Eastern Ocean. Its crew a motley assembly of the undead, flesh rotting even further in the sea air. As one, all their heads turned to the east. 30 voices spoke as one. The 9 times cursed one has been found, Master Ji-hoon. We are sailing to the east. We have found something. One of the Suna men that accompanied them shouted down to Naruto's team. They had been in the mountains for days now, following the map that Senji had found. Kankuro said that no one from Suna ever came this way anymore. The mountains were a death trap if you got caught in a sandstorm. Millions of loose rocks and boulders would batter a person to a pulp, he explained. Plus the trade routes had changed. Senji and Nagi were the first ones up the slope towards where the Suna man had called out to them. There was a small trail, long since abandoned. Right to the side of the trail there was a 3-foot-tall stone tablet. They all gathered around and looked at it in awe. There, engraved in the stone, were 3 heads. The place where might have been 3 crowns implanted in the stone were scratches and digs. This must be where that diary said they pried off the crowns of the 3 kings. Nagi said excitedly. Kankuro stared in disbelief. He had partly believed that this was all a waste of time, but to actually see this marker. So what does the marker say? Senji asked, but not to anyone in particular. Kankuro spoke up. It's a very old language, and I don't understand all of it. But it says, beware the 3 kings. They walk. Beware the 3 kings. The power of the ancients within. Beware the 3 kings. A soft whisper blew through the gathered men. To hell with this. One of the Suna men said and turned around, determined to walk home. Kankuro grabbed the ninja before he went too far and reminded him that Gaara had ordered him to accompany them. The man grew pale and stood his ground. So where do we go from here? Nagi asked. Let's look around. If this is a grave marker, the tomb has to be nearby. Kankuro said. They all split up to scour the hillside. Several hours later, no one had found any sign of an entrance. They made a small camp as night was falling. The Suna nin were seeing about the fire and food while Naruto and company discussed where to go from here. There has to be a clue somewhere here. Senji said frustratingly. Kankuro nodded in agreement. The marker would not be here if the tomb is not here. It is here somewhere. One of the Suna men spoke up. We should not stay here. This mountain is cursed. Death will stalk us here. Kankuro growled at him. You are ninja of Sunagakur. Death is always on our backs. We will face anything that comes with honor, the honor befitting of Suna. Do not let me hear you speak of this again. Silence fell over the camp. Just the sound of the fire crackling broke the cool evening. A soft wind blew through the camp, a ghostly laughter faintly drifting through the air. The camels started to make noise, pulling hard against the ropes that bound them. All the warriors stood up and looked around. The laughter seemed to come from everywhere yet nowhere. That's pretty creepy. Naruto said out loud. The laughter died down and the wind dropped all of a sudden. Kankuro noticed the change in the temperature, from cool evening to a fast rise in heat. That plus the lack of wind. Sandstorm. He shouted. The Suna nin ran for the camels, taking long cloaks with them. They each tackled the camels to the ground, covering their eyes, and pulling the heavy cloaks over both themselves and the camels. Muttering a jutsu that all Suna nin learn at a young age, the cloaks became a thin sheet of solid rock, strong enough to protect from sand, but not much else. Naruto. Guys, Kankuro bellowed at them as the wind picked up to a shrieking gale. Find shelter. Fast. He too lay down flat, dragging his cloak over himself. Senji, Nagi and Naruto looked at each other. Remind me to ask them about that trick afterward, Nagi shouted at Senji before melting into the shadows. Senji took his swords and slashed as hard as he could against the ground, forming a hole which he hopped inside. He had done this a long time ago, when he'd first seen Naruto go berserker, so he hoped it would protect him against what was coming. Naruto saw the two Spirit Wolf clan members looking around frantically for somewhere to shelter. He formed a quick Rasengan and slammed it into a giant rock. It created enough of a space for both of them. He ushered them inside and, forming two more clones, moved another rock in front of it. There was still plenty space, but it was better than nothing. That just left Naruto exposed as the sandstorm hit them. The noise was deafening, more than just sand, it was rocks and boulders the size of people being flung around like leaves. Naruto was going to create another Rasengan hole for himself, but saw rocks heading for the cloak-sheltered Sunanin and Kankuro. Before he could react, one giant boulder smashed through one, shattering the cloak like glass. Blood and screams erupted from the impact, to be drowned out by the noise of the sand and the wind. Naruto saw more rocks heading for the others and acted without thinking. He pushed his hands forward, feeding chakra into it, as much as he could muster. He forced an immeasurable amount of wind in a blast to move those rocks away from his comrades. It was an explosion of gravel and dust as the force of the wind coming from the east met the force of Naruto's wind chakra blast. The unstoppable force of a sandstorm met the immovable force of Naruto's jutsu. Rocks that were caught in the middle turned to dust. Dust found itself pushed to the side and around. Naruto parted the sandstorm like a rock in a stream, making it go around the encampment. Kankuro could not believe his eyes. He could see through a crack in his cloak to what Naruto was doing. That shouldn't be possible. Naruto fell to one knee, feeling the strain on his body. But the sandstorm was not letting up. He called on all the chakra he had, needing it to fight against nature itself. Suddenly Senji was there behind him, bracing his back. The hole Senji was in was fine, but he could see Naruto needed some help. A heartbeat later and Nagi was there too. Both of them held him up straight while he pushed chakra and wind to battle the storm. Seconds turned to minutes. It felt like an eternity, but Naruto held on. As fast as it began, it was over. The wind just stopped and became normal again. The last of Naruto's chakra blast decimated a path in front of them, crumbling boulders and pieces of the cliffs to dust before he could stop. He fell backwards, but Nagi and Senji caught him. The Sunanin released their jutsus and clambered back to their feet. The Spirit Wolf brothers broke free of their shelter, staring in disbelief at Naruto. They'd seen everything from their vantage point. This was the leader of their village, a man who could fight against the power of a sandstorm, and win. Naruto fainted into a deep sleep. Is he alright? Kankuro asked. Senji grinned but didn't bother to answer as Naruto let out a loud snore. He'll be fine. Said Nagi with a smile. Kankuro went to check on the Sunanin who had been crushed. The cloak jutsu only protected against sand, not rocks as large as this one. As he approached though, he saw a hole in the ground where the huge rock had hit. Looking closer, through the gore and body of the crushed Sunanin, was a hole leading into the ground. The rock had passed clean through him and broken into some underground chamber. Moving aside what was left of the body carefully, he peered into the hole. It was at least 2 feet in diameter, but it was clear that it was a lot deeper than one might initially think. After staring into it for a few seconds, he called out to the others. Over here. The tomb is under us! And quote. Chapter 19. Break, Konoha. It was an odd smell, ammonia and fur together. It assaulted the senses. Shikamaru shrugged it off and looked back at Kiba. His face smiled, his voice was steady and sure as he spoke to his friend in his recovery bed in the Inuzuka clan grounds. I'm very glad you are healing, Kiba. And quote. Shikamaru said elatedly. Your bravery in the war against Iwagakure will be noticed, I'm sure. And quote. He grasped Kiba's hand in a firm shake and let go, beaming. Kiba was not the brightest of the rookie 9, but neither was he a fool. Shikamaru was not the overly joyous type, nor was he about to congratulate anyone for that battle. He glanced down at the piece of string he felt in his hand. The string that Shikamaru had slipped there. The string was exceedingly thin, impossible to see from any distance away. Kiba felt a chakra pulse coming from the string, and realized it was Shikamaru. Old ninja code. Shikamaru was sending pulses in numeric sequences. Kiba grasped the idea. Shikamaru didn't want anyone to hear what he really had to say. He frowned. But that would mean that Shikamaru didn't trust the safety of the clan buildings, or maybe the clan itself. His clan. Their teachers had spent the better part of a month training them in this code. A useful technique. Kiba hadn't really wanted to pay attention, but his mother had beaten some sense into him. This could one day save his life. He focused on the pulses Shikamaru was sending. So when do you think you'll be back on your feet? Shikamaru said out loud. Kiba felt for the pulses. Danzo, almost, killed, Asuma. Kiba didn't move, afraid to betray what was going on. He cleared his throat after a few seconds. Any day now. I feel fine, but my mother won't release me just yet. And quat. Kiba tried really hard to remember the right codes and sent his own chakra up the string. What do we do now? Shikamaru smiled in relief. He wasn't sure Kiba would pick up on the chakra pulses. That's good, that's very good. When she does release you we need to get back to training. Since I'm a chunin now I want your nose available for any missions I need you for. I won't leave him to rot in the dungeons until Danzo decides to kill him. Kiba took a few seconds to decipher what Shikamaru had said then nodded. He didn't even bother sending the chakra pulses in reply. Of course, I'll be ready. Ino snuck a glance across the courtyard. The Anbu guarding this side entrance to the Konoha dungeon stood alert. She kept strolling, making sure not to seem too stiff or interested in his presence. Ever since Shikamaru had spoken to them about training harder she had been practicing. Her new technique was still not up to where she thought it was perfected, but hopefully it would be up to the task that had been assigned to her. Her clan specialized in mind reading and manipulation. They did however require one of two things, either physical contact or eye contact. She decided against the physical contact as that might be picked up on a lot easier. The scarf around her neck fluttered in the wind. She knew her blonde hair would also be blowing a bit. Ino was well aware that she was growing into a pretty woman. It was time to see if that male guard would notice. She allowed her scarf to blow off her neck and she reached up to catch it. Her line of sight crossed the guards whose eyes had immediately latched onto her movement, and lingered there. She smiled at him as her eyes met his, and struck. Softly. Quickly. In a second it was over and she was out. He smiled back at her through his mask and looked away, again on alert guarding the entrance. She kept walking, holding a tight grimace on her face. It was a bit of a strain. In this technique she didn't go looking for a specific memory, she took all of the surface memories. Every single one, in one single swipe. Ino went into a tea shop and sat down, closing her eyes. She wordlessly waved away the waitress and signaled for some tea. She felt the pressure as the jumble of memories burned her mind. She sifted through them as fast as she could, knowing that she could only hold on to this much for so long. There, she thought, looking at one particular scene. Found him. Ino bolted from the table and raced for the bathroom. She barely made it there before she threw up. The effort of that jutsu was still a lot for her to handle. Hinata stood in the courtyard, facing her father. He looked sternly down at her. You what? He asked gruffly. I want to learn it, she repeated, standing steadfast. Seeing her friends hurt, the massacre of the war, the cruelty of Danzo had changed something inside Hinata. Suddenly disappointing her father seemed like such a small thing. The style you wish to learn is beyond you. And quat. Hyashi said, not unkindly yet firmly. You cannot even best your smaller sister in a fight. Hinata exclaimed in exasperation. She is my younger sister, and she looks like mother. I cannot strike her. And quat. She shook her head and looked down at her hands. We have to do something. There is no one to save us from this world but ourselves and those we trust. Everyone else is getting stronger, I need to as well. And quat. She looked up at her father, directly in his eyes. He didn't see a single sign of weakness nor a hint of the tears he was sure she'd be shedding. Despite himself he let a small smile slip out. He had always wanted Hinata to be stronger. When her mother died he had lost so much, and both she and Hanabi looked so much like her. Hyashi had not known how to raise daughters. Hanabi took to his style of parenting very well, but Hinata had always been softer. Now he saw strength, and strength Hyashi could work with. He shifted his legs apart and raised one hand palm upwards towards her. Then come daughter, and show me what you know. Hinata looked at him and felt a slight bit of shock. Her father was acknowledging her. Part of her wanted to exclaim in joy. But now was not the time. She faced him squarely, determined to show him how far she had come. She burst forward, her speed momentarily catching Hyashi off guard. Her straight arm palm thrust at his midsection was easily blocked, his hand sweeping down. Her arm bent at the elbow though and her elbow became an attack on his blocking arm, catching it a glancing blow. Hyashi turned and struck out himself. His fingers jabbed outwards, aiming for her inner arm. Hinata opened her arms wider and dodged the jab. She punched with her right hand only to have Hyashi block with his left, twisting around her forearm. He withdrew then punched with both hands. He blocked from the inside, parrying them outwards with both of his hands. She kicked with her left leg and he raised his leg, bringing his knee level and blocking the kick. She swept her right arm in a roundhouse punch, which he avoided by stepping back, but she paused after missing and brought her fist back in a backhand, stepping in. Hyashi kicked forward straight, but Hinata blocked his kick with her foot. He punched forward but Hinata copying one of his moves parried it from the inside. She dropped her arms to her waist and turned, moving her body into his. Hyashi could barely withhold the feeling of shock as Hinata penetrated his defenses. True he was not going all out on her, but nonetheless it was a skillful maneuver. Hinata bent at the waist, backwards, her right hand coming up and over her face towards his neck in a thrust that would incapacitate a lesser opponent. Hiyashi too bent backwards to avoid it, grasping her shirt and heaving her over his twisting body in a throw. In mid-air, Hinata twisted her body and held on tightly to her father's arm. With another twist she brought her feet together under his arm towards his ribcage. It was inventive, it was impromptu. Hinata smiled for the briefest of moments. It was Naruto. Hiyashi grunted as Hinata's kick connected. She did not use enough force to crack anything, but he felt it nonetheless. It was a move that you did not learn in their open palm style, but it worked, so he would not begrudge her that. He brought his left hand across and closed off her right leg chakra points. Hinata grunted a little bit in pain as she broke free of his grasp and fell to the ground, still managing to land on her feet. Hiyashi saw her take the ready stance again, ignoring the pain she had to be feeling in that leg. He lowered his guard, and nodded at Hinata, with the smallest hint of a smile. Hinata wanted to scream in happiness. Her father accepted her, approved of her. Hiyashi cleared his throat. The first thing you need to know about the twin lion step style is that it is a savage dance. Shino gathered his necessities in his sack and left it on his bed. He would not be taking it now, but when he did return he did not expect to have the time to then pack. He prided himself on his clinical ability to plan ahead. He could admit, however, very clinically, that Shikamaru was the best tactician he had ever met. The plan would work. The plan for after the plan would work as well. The plan after that, though, was where the trouble would begin. Middle of the ocean, 7 days west of the Crescent Moon Kingdom. Lee was crazy. That had to be it, Hiraka told herself for the 100th time that week. His latest form of training was swimming after their ship. Not only was it an insane thing to do in the middle of the ocean, but they were moving at 30 knots, so it was insane that he could keep up. Not only that, but he had stripped down to just a short so she could see the weights attached to his legs and arms. The boy needed professional help. Calamity, Sakura and herself leaned against the back railing of the stern of their ship, watching Lee's figure swim the chop behind them. It was getting on in the evening and he'd been at it for an hour. They were just about to call out to him and let him know it was time to come in when a cry went up from the crow's nest. Ship on the horizon. Starboard. The girls walked over to the right side of the boat and saw the speck on the horizon. It was getting larger, so it seemed to be headed in their direction. Lee joined them after a minute, drying off with his towel. "What's going on?" he asked, breathing heavily from the exertion. "There's a ship." And Quat, Hiraka began, only to be interrupted by Calamity. "Frel, that's a pirate ship," she exclaimed. "What?" the others asked in unison. Calamity's eyesight was magnificent, so they did not doubt her. Seconds later the same cry came from the crow's nest again. "Pirates!" The crew was a blur as it moved to speed up the ship to twice what it was before. The wind whipped at the girls as the ship sped ahead, trying to outrun the intercept path of the pirates. For some reason, though, it didn't seem to work. Within minutes it was clear the pirate ship had changed course and not only would intercept them, but was gaining speed even faster than this luxury liner was able to attain. The prince and his son were suddenly on the deck. "What's going on?" he asked frantically. Ikaro clutched looked at Calamity expectantly. "Pirates, your highness, they're gaining fast." And Quat, Kakashi said calmly as he approached. "I suggest you get below. We will deal with it." And Quat. The prince nodded and left to go below. Calamity looked at Ikaro and touched her bow. The boy understood and clutched his own bow and the arrows the two of them had made together. He would protect his dad. Within minutes the pirate ship was close enough that they could make out the state of it. Shockingly, the ship seemed to be already destroyed. It had a huge hole in one side. The sails were in tatters. One of its masts was broken. It was a wreck. The crew nervously poured as much power into their steam engine as they could, but the ship still gained on them. As the ship pulled up alongside, they could finally see the crew of that dilapidated ship. Pirates in various forms of decomposition were animatedly gathering their weapons. Swords and pistols were unsheathed and unholy groans and howls echoed over the sea to the crew of the prince's liner. Kakashi stood stunned. A ship of the undead. "Calamity, take a few out, let's see what happens." And Quat, Kakashi asked of her. With a shudder Calamity notched several arrows to her bow. "With pleasure." And Quat. A sharp twang and 3 arrows found their targets. 3 bodies were thrown backwards from the force of the impact. The other pirates didn't seem fazed in the least. With good reason, it seems, as the 3 hit pirates got to their feet and didn't even bother to pull the arrows out, just stood there, waiting for the ships to get close enough to board. Hiraka shivered. "What are they?" Kakashi shook his head. "Reanimated corpses. I've seen jutsu that can do this. The only way to kill them is to remove the head or destroy the brains. An arrow won't do the job, Calamity. You need to completely destroy the brain. We must not let them board. When they are close enough, start your attacks." Sakura fixed her steely gaze on the ship as it approached. She heard a click and saw Lee gently remove his weights from his legs and his wrists, and lay them on the deck. He saw her look at him and he spoke as he looked back across the water. "Guy-sensei once told me only to remove the weights if in the battle my life or someone else's life I wished to protect depended on it. But I've seen war. In every battle a life hangs in the balance." And Quat. He cracked his knuckles and his neck. The ship was within 15 feet of them. "Let's show these guys the fires of our youth," Lee cried out as he sprung from the railings and flipping in the air, landed on the pirate ship. As he landed, a pirate shot a pistol at him. Lee bent at the waist and twisted to the side. The bullet took out a pirate behind him. Lee sped in and with a solid punch to the chin, sent the undead pirate flying backwards. A light whistle alerted Lee to the danger and he ducked low as a blade sliced the air above him. He backflipped and struck with his foot the top of the pirate who had swung the sword's head, crushing the top of his skull. The pirate fell in a heap and didn't move. Lee, satisfied that this method would kill them, continued to attack. Sakura and Hiraka landed on the deck. Sakura was a blur of fists, her first punch atomizing a zombie pirate's head. Hiraka twisted and snaked her scarf towards another, sending chakra pulses down it, to wrap it around the neck of a pirate. With a switch of her stance and a twist of her body, she pulled and snapped the neck. Knowing she needed to do more than that though, she heaved harder and crushed the neck completed, and pulled the head off the shoulders, ripping the decomposing skin and tendons. The head rolled and Hiraka pulled her scarf in for another attack. A pirate slashed at Sakura, forcing her to dodge, left, right, then left again. The undead sailor pressed her, kept pushing and slicing the air with his sword as she dodged. Frustrated, the pirate pulled out his pistol and fired point blank. Sakura didn't have time to move as the slug hit her in the side and passed right through, impacting the rotten wooden cabin behind her. The pirate leaned in, his foul breath close to Sakura. "Where is the 9 times cursed one?" his eerie voice demanded. "His scent is on you." Sakura reached up and jabbed her fingers under his chin, penetrating the soft flesh there and pulling hard, ripped his lower jaw out. Her other fist cocked back and destroyed the pirate's head. She clutched her side, quickly applied a local numbing jutsu. It would not fix the damage, but she wouldn't feel it for a few minutes. It had passed clean through and was far enough to her side that she wasn't worried about it. Back on the prince's ship, the crew members and the prince's entourage stood watching. Several members of the entourage looked anxiously on as the girls and Lee battled the undead pirates. Kakashi noticed them and looked for a few seconds before smirking behind his mask. He turned his attention back to the pirate ship. "The girls are doing a good job, Lee as well. But there are too many pirates. We need to destroy the ship completely." And quat. Kakashi said out loud to no one in particular. Calamity looked at him for a second then grinned. She pulled out her arrows and started attaching exploding tags to the tips. She didn't have the chakra control to set these off, but she could place them and then maybe. She looked at Kakashi questioningly and he looked back, nodding. She began firing the arrows into the hull of the ship, at equal distances, 5 feet apart. Thud, thud. They lined the bottom hull of the ship. Lee got sliced by a lucky pirate, his arm bleeding. He swiveled and crushed the pirate's face with the heel of his boot. Hiraka cried angrily out as a sword punched a hole in her scarf. A hail of pistol fire aimed at her, but she flipped and jumped high into the air, dodging well. Kakashi saw what was going on and shouted at one of the prince's entourage, "Go get them." Calamity was confused as to why Kakashi would tell civilians to enter the battle, but watched wide-eyed as 5 normal-looking men jumped the distance to the pirate ship. One guy ran to where Sakura was. She saw him coming and looked perplexed for a second. But in a flash he was by her side, and within a blink they appeared back on the ship. Lee as well was grabbed by one of the entourage and in a blink of an eye they were back on the ship. Hiraka was able to jump back over on her own, landing next to Sakura who was bleeding. Kakashi whistled hard and the 3 entourage members left on the pirate ship grinned and waved back. One of them dove over the railing and released a pulse of weak chakra. He dispersed into a cloud of smoke, but had sacrificed his chakra to light all the exploding tags. "What the hell?" Hiraka exclaimed. "Shadow clones," Sakura cried out. "Naruto?" The 2 remaining clones on the ship let go their henge and resumed the appearance of Naruto, replete in his white suit. "The 9 times cursed one." And quat. All the pirates said in unison. "Our master searches for you. We will take you to our master." Naruto grinned back at them. "Fat chance, zombie pirates. Ninjas win every time." With a chakra push of wind, the 2 Narutos pushed the prince's ship away from the pirate ship. The exertion caused both to puff into clouds of smoke. Seconds before the pirate ship exploded into nothing but splinters and tattered rags. Bodies were flung into the sky and into the ocean. Nothing remained of the ship. Sakura turned to the entourage member who had Hiraitioned her to the prince's ship. "Naruto." He looked at her sheepishly. "You've got red on you." To the east of Sunagakure, Naruto awoke with a start. The memories of the battle on the pirate ship came flooding into him. He smiled as he realized that the girls had fought better than he thought they would, and vowed to not underestimate them again. He looked around and realized they were in a dark cavern. Lit torches surrounded them and some distance away Nagi and Senji were talking heatedly with Kankuro and the Suna Nin. Naruto struggled to his feet and walked over. "What's going on, guys?" They stopped talking and looked over at him. "Naruto," Senji exclaimed happily. "Glad you're alright." Kankuro nodded. Naruto continued to surprise him. That display of power earlier had been impressive. So where are we? Naruto asked, looking around. The cavern they were in seemed to be man-made. Ornate pillars stretched up to the ceiling. The walls seemed to be alive with carvings and paintings. Well, the storm punched a hole in the ceiling of this place, so we climbed in. It seems to be a main hall. An entryway into the tomb of the three kings. Kankuro replied. Excellent. Naruto said. So let's go get those swords for you, Senji. He strode forward only to be grabbed back by Nagi. No, Naruto, he said, gripping Naruto's arm tightly. It's booby-trapped. There are warnings all over the walls about entering the chamber. Naruto shrugged. I'll send in some shadow clones and we'll see what the traps are. He made the hand signals for his favorite jutsu. Only for nothing happened. Hey, what's going on? He asked, perplexed. Senji nodded. Yay, all of us. I can't feel any chi. Nagi can't use his abilities. Kankuro said he can't create chakra strings for his puppets. In this chamber there seems to be some method to suppress chakra. Naruto scowled. So what are we going to do? The Spirit Wolf clan members came over with notes between them, having been studying the wall drawings. We think we have all the clues to enter the chamber. Ravi said. Rashid nodded. Yes, there are 3 tests, one each devised for each of the 3 kings. First, show your respect to the royal king. Secondly, follow in the footsteps of the avenging son. Thirdly, you must stay true and uphold the honor of the assassin. Naruto stared at them. Okay, so what does that mean? The Spirit Wolf brothers looked at each other and shrugged. I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Kankuro growled. We will send in one of my men to check it out. He waved over one of the Suna Nin, wearing his dust-colored coat over a dark red shirt. Go take a look. Carefully. Kankuro ordered the ninja. The ninja nodded and entered what was a long dark tunnel. The torch seemed to make little to no impact on the darkness of the tunnel. After a few seconds, Naruto and the others could only make out the barest flicker of the light. A whistle of air and the light fell to the ground. Moments later, the head of the Suna Nin rolled to the feet of Kankuro, who looked at it in shock. Naruto swore. Okay, that didn't work. We are not sending in any more people until we can figure out those clues. Kankuro looked over at him with regret and surprise on his face. We're Suna Nin. We do not back down. Naruto was upset at the unnecessary death. No one is backing down, but even I don't rush into a trap. Remembering how he used to be on his first mission, he sheepishly grinned and rubbed the back of his neck as he admitted, any more. Nagi looked thoughtful. His head is severed clean. Means a blade took it off. So the first trap is one or several blades. In the darkness it would be impossible to see those coming, and the corridor only allows for one person at a time. Naruto said thoughtfully. I can do it. Senji said calmly. No, Senji, wait, we can figure out another way. Naruto said. Hey, they don't call me the Dark Blade for nothing, Naruto. Remember my kumite match? He replied. Besides, this whole hunt was my idea, and I'm the one who wants the swords, so the risk should be mine. Naruto did remember that match. He had fought blindfolded and won against a very skilled opponent. With a sigh, Naruto nodded. If you lose your head, I promise you I will stick it in a men's room toilet when we get home for all of eternity. Nagi grinned at Senji. 10 silver says you get injured. Senji laughed. Take an exclamation mark and quat. He entered the corridor without a torch. Walking slowly, Senji closed his eyes. He couldn't see anyway and didn't want anything to distract from his other senses. He took step after step, feeling the stone floor turn a little slippery. The blood from the unfortunate Suna Nin was seeping down the corridor. Senji knew he should be okay up until he reached the actual body. As his feet found the body, he heard a slight whistle. Senji bent backwards at the waist, feeling a long sharp blade cut the air above him. He straightened up, hearing now machinery moving as the blade came around again. This time he dove forward. He felt another blade coming up from the right, designed to cut a person in two. He rolled and came to a stop when he hit something hard. The blade stopped. Senji opened his eyes. The darkness of the corridor was behind him, but the small room at the end of the corridor he could barely see in. Looking at what he was leaning against, he realized it was a statue of a king sitting on a throne. Humph, he whispered to himself. Show your respect, huh? Wanted us to bow and kneel to you before we enter? Way to command respect, your highness. He stood up, seeing in the dim light a small room to the left that had gears and housed what looked like the blades. He went into the room and with a heave pulled one of the cogs out. He went back outside. Hey guys, it's clear. Come on in, he shouted to his friends. Naruto and the crew entered the tunnel, making their way past the trap. The Suna Nin grabbed their friend and wrapped the body in his cloak. They gently laid him down to the side of the little chamber they were in. Kankuro looked up at the statue of the king. He looks just like my father, he remarked. Stern, cruel. Naruto put his hand on his shoulder and looked to the spirit wolf brothers in the dim light. They nodded back and raised their torches. Beyond the statue was Anther Tunnel. Follow the footsteps of the avenging sun. Senji sighed and entered the tunnel again, noticing this one was a lot shorter. Guys? Can you come up here? They all entered the tunnel and came out into the chamber that Senji was in. It was a large room with large square stone tiles. At the far end they spied a statue of a ninja, spear in one arm, body leaning to one side, hand out and a beckoning signal. All kind of alarms are going off in my head right now. And quat. Senji said, this is very dangerous. Nagi looked carefully at the runes on the floor. These are martial art markings, he said. Names of positions. Riding horse. Crane with one wing. And quat. He looked up at the statue. This is a test of your taijutsu skills. We need to do just the right moves in just the right sequence in order to get past this one. Naruto frowned. I'm not a taijutsu expert. Senji shrugged, neither am I. The Spirit Wolf Clan brothers said, we are, but we work in tandem. I doubt the trap will allow two people to pass. Kankuro shook his head. I am a puppet master. My hand-to-hand combat is rudimentary. Nagi sighed. I am probably our best shot here. My style is capoeira, but maybe I can adapt it slightly to pass this test. And quat. He stepped up to what he thought was the starting block. He stared at the blocks around him for a few minutes, in dead silence. Everyone watched him nervously. Nagi brought his hands to his side and twisted his back leg back in a basic capoeira move. Then in a twirl he was off. He landed in spread stance, saying quietly the title on the blocks. The tiger hugs its head. And quat. His left hand in a fist over his head, his right arm palm backwards across his chest. He swung his leg forward, shifted his weight to it and somersaulted to the next set of stones. Two small darts flew up from stones dangerously close to Nagi, surprising everyone. He landed on another stone, on one leg, the other up across his thigh, his arms back and front in a gripping position. Hegemon King pours his drink. Careful Nagi, Kankuro shouted out. I can smell the poison in the darts from here. One graze and you'll be dead in 30 seconds. Nagi let a drop of sweat fall. Thanks. Senji barked out. This is a chance to win back your 10 silver. Nagi grinned and looked around at the stones. If this were his taijutsu form, he just went from a defensive stance to a multi-use attack and defense one. The next logical step would be an attack, then a counter block, then an attack, then a defense. He spied the closest attack step and moved towards that stone. He swept his legs underneath himself and sprang forward onto one hand, palm springing across to an overhead kick, then spinning around and landing in a grasshopper stance. He was halfway across the room. Naruto watched quietly and anxiously as one of his best friends risked everything on a martial arts style he wasn't familiar with. Although he did look natural while doing it. Nagi flipped again, landing on his left leg. Then it happened. There was a creak and a spike fell from the ceiling, aimed right for the tile he was on. Nagi spied it and lunged onto another tile. Another spike fell. Apparently the test was meant to be done faster, Nagi thought, then inwardly summoning up his courage. He moved completely on instinct. He danced his capoeira, using his moves, flips and attack stances as he moved from tile to tile. He heard a click beneath one of his steps and he dodged just in time to avoid darts being shot out of the stone. Another ominous click and the floor erupted in a swarm of darts. Nagi twisted and flipped, moving as fast as he could. There were gaps in the attack, gaps where he would be unharmed. He moved, danced, turned and flipped his way through the openings. Finally, he landed on the far side of the room, collapsing to his knees. Nagi, Naruto shouted, about to run out after his friend. Nagi raised his hand. Wait, I'm alright, just need to catch my breath. He stood up slowly, breathing in deep. That was close. He saw a lever by the statue and pulled on it. The statue shifted slightly to the right and the floor resonated with a click. He picked up a rock and skipped it across the floor. No darts rose up. Okay, looks safe now. And quat. Nagi said, motioning them over. They cautiously walked over to him, spying a door behind the statue. They cautiously opened it and entered the next room. In the room stood a pedestal with two swords. Surrounding the room was many piles of gold, jewelry and coins, rare stones and statues. The wealth of an ancient kingdom all in this room. All eyes though were on the pedestal in the middle of the room, for next to it stood a ghost of a man. Nuga Dangzan Yun. And quat. The eerie voice echoed in the cavern, the ghost pointing at Senji. They looked at each other curiously. Kankuro cleared his throat. It's an old language. As royalty I was taught it, but it's not used anymore. He asked, who are you? Senji cleared his throat. I am Senji. These are my friends. I have come for Gonjang and Mo Yi. Before Kankuro could translate, the ghostly figure laughed eerily. Gonjen? Mo Yi? We Dangzan I Gudale Yul Haya Habnika? He asked, why should you have them? And quat. Kankuro chimed in afterwards. Yeah, Senji nodded. I figured he said something like that. I will use them to kill demons and protect my friends. Kankuro translated for the ghost who looked at him sharply. Kal yul nun hui saeng I uihi mandul o jasub nita. Dangzanai gudale I de han chingu hui saeng gaia hab nita dot and quat. He whispered in the gloomy cavern. You must sacrifice, kill, one of us to get the swords dot and quat. Kankuro said incredulously. And yes, I think he's serious. Senji stared at the ghost before him. I will not. The ghost did not wait for Kankuru's translation. Gulium dangzan yun jug oil geos ida. Then you will die dot and quat. Kankuro said. The room began to shake and rocks began to fall. We need to get out of here. He and the Sunan Nin went back through into the other room. The two spirit wolf brothers followed suit, with their pants looking suspiciously stuffed with gold and treasures. Not without those swords dot and quat. Senji said stubbornly. He approached the ghost defiantly. The ghost wore what looked like ancient battle armor and pulled his own sword out. Senji drew his swords, walking closer, repeating the last hint. Uphold the honor of the assassin. Uphold the honor of the assassin. Uphold the honor of the assassin. As he took a step up to meet the ghost, he thought back to the story of the three kings, what the assassin had done for a boy he had just met on a journey. He had sacrificed everything. With a start, Senji knew what he had to do. He stopped in his tracks, prayed that he was right, and plunged his swords into his stomach. Senji! Naruto screamed, rushing forward. An impenetrable but invisible barrier sprung up between Naruto, Nagi, and Senji, keeping his friends away while the ghost stepped in front of Senji. The ghost sheathed his sword and pulled Senji's sword out of his body. Touching the wound, he looked kindly at the fallen warrior. Dangzan I nal yung guang ibnita. Dangzan yun gashagasta dot and quat. The wound closed up and Senji coughed. The ghost stood up and motioned for the swords. They appeared in his hands and he bowed to Senji. Senji stood and grasped the swords, feeling the power within them. He bowed back to the ghost who smiled and dissipated. The trembling in the room stopped. A statue that looked exactly like the ghost on the far side of the room shifted slightly, showing a stairwell that led up. Guys! Senji turned and grinned. I did it. Naruto and Nagi ran over and gripped his shoulders, grinning. They then looked at each other and decked him, knocking him on his ass. Don't you ever do something so stupid again, Naruto shouted at Senji. Fool! Nagi chimed in. They helped a shaken Senji to his feet, then hugged him. They turned to see the vast treasure around them. 50% for Suna, 25% for the Spirit Wolf clan. Leaves 25% for us dot and quat. Nagi said. Naruto nodded. This should help our village out a lot as we're new dot and quat. Senji grinned, clutching his new swords, staring at the ornate markings that ran the length of the blades. They practically sang to him, happy to have a new owner. Konoha Shikamaru looked at his friends. Shino, Kiba, Ino, Kuji, Hinata. He breathed in deep. As of now there was no going back. You know what to do. Hinata, Ino, thank you for what you're doing, and what you will be doing. Your part is more dangerous than ours will be dot and quat. Shikamaru said gratefully. Hinata and Ino nodded. They all fell silent. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby you can be the director of the opponent's fate dot and quat. Shikamaru said quietly. We are ninja of the leaf. We will not be seen, we will not be heard. We are in control of our own destiny. They left the room, heading for their positions. The guard for the Konoha dungeon settled in. He had just taken over for his compatriot. It was midnight and there was no moon tonight. He shrugged and stretched. Another boring night of guard duty. He bent down to pick up his backpack and found himself unable to stop. His head crashed directly into the ground, rendering him unconscious. Shikamaru released the shadow hold on the man. He nodded to Shino, who without breaking cover let his bugs swarm the lock, forcing it to click open. The bugs disappeared, finding their way in the darkness back to Shino. Hinata came in over the radios they had on their heads. The door is open. I can see inside now. 4 chakra signatures between you and Asuma. 1 on this floor, 3 below, clustered together. Thanks Mama Bear dot and quat. Kiba said, snickering lightly. Code names were necessary but he couldn't help himself, despite the situation. Kiba and Kuji stayed outside while Ino, Shino and Shikamaru entered the dungeon. They went down the corridor slowly. Around the corner dot and quat. Hinata's voice came in over the earpiece. Shikamaru snaked his shadow around the corner, grabbing the man. He made the man run into the wall, hard. He passed out immediately. The 3 of them walked around the corner, over the man. They spied the stairwell, and descended. There's a desk, 1 sitting, 2 standing around to a side. 1 is smoking dot and quat. Hinata said. Ino pulled on an Onbu mask, allowing only her eyes to be seen. Pulling the cloak around her and the hood up, she walked around the corridor. She approached the guards without them making much note of her presence. After all, she was Onbu, they were Onbu, and this was deep within a high security prison. Shino's bugs grabbed the one on the right, Shikamaru's shadow the one on the left. Ino caught the eyes of the one sitting down and she slipped into his mind, wiping it. It was a nasty trick, one that she had been taught to never use except in battle. By accident any member of her clan could wipe someone's mind. But they were more geared towards information gathering. The man lolled back in his chair, drooling, nothing more than a vegetable now. Shikamaru has his guard muffle the other guard's screams with his hand, while the bugs drained his chakra rendering him unconscious. Then he forced him to knock himself out with a staff. It took 2 hits, his head was hard. Ino grabbed the keys from the belt of the guard sitting at his desk and tossed them to Shikamaru. He caught them mid-stride and went straight for Asuma's cell. He opened it to see his sensei on the floor propped weakly against a wall. Bruises and matted blood adorned his face. Shikamaru cursed and walked over, grabbing one arm and lifting Asuma to his feet bodily. Asuma looked at Shikamaru through his swollen eyes and grunted. As they walked out, Asuma pointed at the cell door opposite. "Hey Anko." Shikamaru adjusted his plan slightly, which he always allowed for, and nodded to Ino to open Anko's cell. She however was in no better condition. She was unclothed, spread-eagled, suspended in the air upside down with her arms bound by chains to the near side of the room, and her legs to the far side of the room. Her back was adorned with welts and cuts, blood dripping freely down onto the floor. Puddles of it had congealed. Ino bit back her curse and motioned Shino over. He too seemed shaken, but he directed his bugs to eat through her chains. They swarmed the chains around her ankles and wrists. Ino positioned herself to catch Anko and did when the bugs succeeded. Anko was not conscious at all. Ino put her on her back and bent forward, pumping chakra to her legs to carry the weight. With a nod to Shikamaru they raced as fast as they could out of the dungeon. Once outside, they felt the cold night air hit them with a blast. Kuji and Kiba nodded at them and took point as they raced down the street, heading for the west gate. It took a full minute. As they approached, Kuji saw the normal 2 guards on that gate standing in the middle of the road facing away from them, looking for danger from the outside not from within. Silently he transformed into his meat tank and began to roll. Kiba performed a Gatsuga on Kuji from behind, sending him flying at impossible speeds towards the guards. They never saw it coming. He impacted them with so much force that they were unconscious before they hit the ground. All of this was done with only the sound of flesh hitting flesh. Not a scream, not a shout went up. Nothing to raise an alarm. "Ino, trade Anko to Shino. And Quat," Shikamaru ordered. "Thanks for your help, now get back home and remember you know nothing. When you are questioned, and you will be, you were asleep. Fix your memories." Ino nodded. Of course, with her sensei broken out of jail and her teammates missing, she will be questioned. But her father would not allow her to be held without proof. He did have some clout on the council, and once she cleaned up her memories of tonight a little bit, there would be nothing to link her. Hinata likewise removed her headset and walked calmly back home. As far as anyone knew, the heiress was fast asleep in her room. And that was what the Hyuga clan would attest to. Shikamaru watched Ino leave and then nodded to the others. "Let's get to the Forest of Death as fast as we can. We have until morning, maybe, before the escape is discovered. I want us well hidden before that. There are a few old underground bunkers we will be staying in. My family does the caretaking for those grounds and no one else but my father, and I know that they are there." With one last heave of Asuma onto his back, Shikamaru took off, with Shino carrying Anko, Kuji and Kiba following. Naruto's army had officially gone rogue. Well, that's the end of part 6-2. What if Naruto created his own village? Well, I have to get on with the other what ifs, so I hope you guys enjoyed and I wish all of you a wonderful day/night. Bye.